Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. I just got finished on the DDV podcast, and one thing that they kind of called me out for a little bit, and probably rightfully so, was for the discussion that I had with Anarchy Seeds. And I personally think that this was not... I went into this a little too confident, and I do think that... Or not too confident, a little hastily. I think it was an iffy decision to do that, but I ultimately think that overall, I think for my mental clarity, it was a good experience. I think I did look bad to an extent. I probably lost the argument from an objectivist perspective, although I did feel like I have had some good points. But I think ultimately, I didn't actually defend the ideas I was trying to defend and defend objectivism. I think, especially early on, and a lot of the video was me, I kind of let him get away with a few things. Like, for example, when I gave the justification for objectivism, for natural rights from an objectivist perspective, he said, oh, this is essentially the same as Murray Rothbard's self-ownership. This is not true whatsoever. The Rothbardian idea of self-ownership is a very subjectivist form of morality. It essentially comes down to this sort of idea that what he actually elaborated on later in the video, that your self-interest and your what is good for you is ultimately what you do, your chosen preferences, all these things. It's a very, very subjectivist form of morality, and it's completely against objectivism. Objectivism views life as the standard with happiness as the purpose. Life as the standard is an objective standard because you are either alive or you're dead. Things are either help you live or they lead towards death. And ultimately, happiness is also an objective thing because happiness is an objective state that you actually feel in reality. These two together form the idea of what good is. It's not some subjective self-ownership sort of thing. Self-ownership is not a moral claim in the same sense that life is something that is good. Self-ownership, how do you decide whether that's good? It's you don't, and ultimately these libertarians, they don't have the same justification. They don't have a moral justification. They simply say, because you own your body, then whatever you do with it is good. That's completely wrong. It's such a backwards way of viewing the world. Because what you do is not necessarily in your self-interest. And we got into this in the video. If you do something that contradicts your life and contradicts your happiness, you're not acting in your self-interest. That's a basic fact, and it's like immoral to not act in your self-interest, because not acting in your self-interest goes against your life and it goes against your happiness, which is the essence of what immorality is from an objectivist perspective. You are killing yourself, essentially. It's not moral to kill yourself. You have the right to do so, obviously, because you have the right to use your own mind, because your own mind is what's required for your life. That's the fact. Your own mind is required for is an objective requirement for reality, because humanity, or a human being, not humanity, that's a very collective term. I should not use the word humanity. Because a human being, his life is sustained by his mind. His mind is his means of survival. That's the word I was fucking looking for. Sorry. His mind is his means of survival, and a mind is an individual faculty. No one can think for you. No one can act for you. So you need to think for yourself if you want to ever. You can't force happiness. So if you force everyone to do what's in their self-interest all the time, you're never going to be happy because you're not living as a human being, living qua man, life as a human being. That general idea of objectivism. So ultimately, this idea of self-ownership as being the moral standard is completely wrong. It's completely backwards and immoral. Self-ownership justifies complete subjectivism, complete whim. And ultimately, as this is actually something I mentioned somewhat in the video, when you have complete subjectivism, complete whim, it's a very vapid sort of morality, and you don't have any sort of objective requirements, and it creates this mental chaos of what do I pursue, what do I set as the standard, and it's just whatever your whims say, which is chaotic. So you essentially need some higher power, some God, society, government, to come in and tell you what's right, tell you what the good is, tell you how to live, because you don't have this one objective standard. This is why Rothbard and Rand are so inconsistent with each other. It doesn't work. Rothbard does not actually defend a libertarian, or not, libertarian's a stupid word, I should not use that word, does not actually defend a free society. He advocates for anarcho-capitalism, which ultimately leads to whimsical law, which is absolutely terrible because you can't think and act long range when you act under whimsical laws. And ultimately, it'll lead to one law may overcome the rest, and it's basically whichever law can use the most force, because it's rule of force in that sense. This is what happens when you look at these bigger cities, these cities where there's minimized police presence of a single law. You have all these these groups getting together, and they need protections from other groups that are going to use force against them. So they create a gang, and then this other group creates a gang, and then it's gang warfare. That is what fucking happens under anarchy. It's just absolutely terrible. Anarchy does not work. Anarchy is not a way to ensure a free society. It's a way to, it's not like, the purpose of a government is to extract force from society. When you get rid of this monopoly on force that puts it all in one place, you spread it out throughout society, which is absolutely terrible because the mind cannot operate under force. When you spread out force into society, it doesn't work. So, yeah, I think that's a lot of stuff in this video, but essentially, libertarianism and objectivism are diametrically opposite, because libertarian acts on this assumption that self-ownership is a value, and self-ownership assumes that whatever your chosen preferences is moral and is good and is in your self-interest, which is absolutely untrue, and it leads to terrible consequences like anarchism, where each person is allowed to pursue their own preference, and then they'll form these groups, or they'll accumulate arms, and it's simply, that becomes a sort of dog-eat-dog type of system. So yeah, essentially these people, they form sort of groups and then use force on other groups to get whatever they want, to use force on other people, and they are incentivized to behave irrationally, because you can't think long-term when law is whimsical. So you have to think short-term and behave pragmatically and irrationally. So a libertarian society without one government that has one objective rule of law devolves into chaos, and it doesn't allow human beings to think rationally and to plan long-term and to live happy lives. And it is just as bad as any form of socialism, communism. So ultimately, me and someone like Anarchy Seeds are diametrically opposed. We have completely differing ideologies. So yeah, we are not on the same side in this battle. In capitalism, we both argue for freer markets, but we are diametrically opposed in our ideal systems. So I hope this video cleared up a few things. I wish I could have made these points more clearly during my actual discussion with Anarchy Seeds, but this is my response, essentially. So hopefully this clears up a few things. But yeah, I think one thing for me is I need to be more confident in these sorts of discussions. I need to be more outspoken. I let him control the narrative, which was a very negative thing for my part, because I wasn't solid on a lot of these concepts. I think now I'm a little more solid because I've heard the arguments, and I essentially probably lost that debate. But I think that I did gain something valuable from that type of discussion. So obviously I know, Diego would be opposed to me for saying this, but I really do think I gained something from that discussion, because I gained a lot more insight into the way these libertarians think, and a lot more insight into how to respond to it. This video is key if you watched anything related to libertarianism and have any thoughts on that. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say for today. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Just keep watching my videos, y'all. This is where shit's getting good. Peace.